if I was seeing someone where I would see them for like 2 months and they would come in with kind of big goals, and I would be in a place of like, okay, well, let's just talk about what we can do in this 2-month block. And we would like get started and make some progress, right? But I really wanted it to feel manageable, like to feel real, like we're actually moving the needle on this thing that you say you want to change, right? And so then I had to really kind of step into, and this is something I think that was an adjustment from my sort of therapy training to coach training, to step into the space of like, I believe that to work on these things you're saying, it's going to take longer. And so here's the kind of option on the table if you really want to do these things that you say you want to do.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. If you're a therapist or healer, and there's a good chance that you are, you may have heard about these executive coaches who make hundreds or thousands of dollars an hour. I've been in rooms where therapists are kind of pissed off about this. Like, why are these executive coaches bringing in money hand over fist? It's not fair. Some of them don't even have the training I have. I'm wondering, could some small part of that reaction be envy or curiosity? Just a little bit? And maybe a little bit of binary thinking? Like, this work over here is altruistic, that work over there is not. Side note, I know for sure people have those thoughts about business coaches like me because I've been in those rooms too. But that's for a different day. Well, I, for one, have been really curious about executive coaching. So here's what I want to tackle today. What's it like to be an executive coach? Would you like it? Could you do it? How would you get started? How would you get clients? We've got a guest who's going to help us answer all of that. Dr. Alyssa Adams is a psychologist, intuitive business coach, and executive coach. Welcome, Alyssa. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here and chat with you today. Thank you for having me.
So you have a few branches to your business, and we're going to focus in on executive coaching. And I also want folks to know, though, will you just tell us briefly about what the other branches of your business are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of have 3 separate arms to my business. I like to keep it mixed up a little. So one arm of that is where I see therapy clients 1 day a week. And the other arm of my business is that I do business coaching for therapists who are looking to grow their practice or diversify their practice by adding coaching onto what they do. And then this third arm, which we'll be talking a lot about today, is really the leadership executive coaching piece.
What percentage of your time would you say, and about what percentage of your income comes from executive coaching at this point?
That's a good question. I would say it's probably about a third, maybe a little bit less. I've tried to kind of balance it out a little. And yeah, I think if I had to estimate, probably about a third.
And in the executive and leadership coaching realm, who tends to hire you? Is it the individual who needs the coaching who hires you, or is it the company they're working for, or both?
Yeah, that's a great question. So both. The bulk, though, I would say, of the work that I've been doing has been the individual coming in to work with me. The work I've done more with organizations tends to be more senior leaders. Where the company is really open to investing in their senior leadership team. And the kind of individual leadership coaching that I've done has been really neat because it's a lot of folks who kind of their own volition are like, I'm new to leadership, or I've been had a recently expanded team, or something has changed or shifted. Or they're just pretty self-aware and they're like, I know that it's hard to lead a team, or I'm having a hard time conveying my message to them and motivating people. So I'll get a lot of folks kind of reaching out who are in that scenario who want to invest in that themselves.
Okay. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, just like so many things in life, being a boss, being a leader is a skill set. It's a huge skill set.
Absolutely. And often people are taken from these positions where they're like really high performing as an individual contributor. And because of that, they're promoted into these leadership positions, right? And, I had this experience myself where I was sort of plunked into a leadership position unexpectedly. And, they don't totally feel like they have the right prep to be successful.
Well, that was totally true for me. The times when I was a boss, mixed reviews. Some people were happy with me as their boss, some people not, and everything in between. But absolutely, I felt like, okay, being good at the thing that got me here is not going to get me good at this.
Yeah,
This
totally.
managing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really confronting sometimes for people, to be in a space of trying to motivate others. And now your success depends on other people's success. And it's a big shift.
Absolutely. And what is the outcome that they're usually looking for when they begin to work with you?
Yeah, it's a few different things, but some of the common threads are like improved communication. So being able to communicate with all different types of personality styles. So if they have a larger team, being able to kind of shift and modify their communication based on who they're talking with or their own supervisor. Usually it's improving kind of their executive presence, where now they might need to speak in front of groups or be looked to speak about their ideas. So really wanting to kind of build that confidence and executive presence. Sometimes it's time management and productivity when they have increased demands, increased pressure, the stakes are higher. Some emotional intelligence pieces too, that now they're kind of working with like a whole variety of different people and personalities. And before maybe they were able to kind of lean in a little bit more on themselves. And they're just kind of tasked with being able to kind of read different things and empathize with their folks. So,
Yeah. And do you work with folks from marginalized communities who find that they have to kind of manage things like microaggressions or things like how other people are seeing them in their leadership role, that kind of stuff?
yeah, that's such a great question. I feel like it hasn't been, at least for me in my experience, that hasn't been a lot of the like presenting reasons that people have come to coaching, but certainly some of that kind of bubbles to the surface, I think, as you go along your journey of getting to know someone and talking about what it's really like day to day for them.
And what do you notice in terms of how people are finding you? So before you answer, I have kind of like a personal bet, and I'm always delighted to be wrong about things. So tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'll be just as happy either way. But so my bet is that you get most of this work through personal referrals, and like that it kind of grows that way rather than through more, other kinds of marketing. But am I right or am I wrong?
Yes. So I think you are right. um, and like plus some other things. So I think it's definitely been personal referral. It's also been speaking engagements. So doing some speaking for different places, maybe someone kind of in the audience or the company is interested. So that's been a helpful way to kind of just get out there and really show your expertise in different areas, which has been kind of fun because I like public speaking too. So it's been a fun way to kind of draw in people.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. And what would be like a good example of a place where you did a public speaking gig and then that was kind of an optimal place to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done them for different places like nonprofits or kind of small groups. I did one at a construction company not too long ago, and that kind of has turned into some proposal submissions, and we're kind of working through logistics on coaching. So it kind of gives people a taste of you. Like, do you connect with their audience, their group? Do they like what you have to say? Are you approachable?
So how did that one happen? Just for example, like how did that construction one happen? Did you approach them or like how was that introduction facilitated?
Great question. So I signed up a while ago for like a free speaker kind of directory where you list some topics that you're interested in speaking on, and you do these topics for free. And then, sometimes nothing comes of it, sometimes something comes of it, just kind of depends. But places have then reached out to me, they're either planning like a leadership retreat or a leadership day, or some sort of staff meeting thing, where they're looking for somebody to come in, and they reach out, and it's been really fun to get that kind of door open, where it's sometimes hard to reach out, just cold reach outs to come in and speak.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. And then once you have a little bit of a relationship with someone, how do you nurture that I mean, it's always like hard to word this, because it's not as if you're trying to like sell, but it is important to nurture these relationships so that you're the person that they think of when you're actually the right person to help them. So how do you kind of nurture those relationships over time?
Such an awesome question. And it's such an important way, I think, of building like any component of your business, where I'm even trying to do that with my individual people who are not companies, as well as my companies that I have connection with, but to try to like truly build that authentic relationship with them, right? So they kind of know what you're up to. So I think having this opportunity to reach out to say, here's something I'm doing in the community. Here's another speaking event I'm doing, or a webinar that your clients might be interested in. Or I've opened up, 10 slots for kind of a very specific communication coaching day, so if your folks are interested, I have these like free slots, something where you're kind of keeping them in the loop, or even just reaching out for a thank you. Hey, I had such a great experience there. These are some of the things that I do and help support people with. So do your folks need any support in those areas? So it's kind of like this offering of service, right? Like, do your people need more of this thing that I do? And kind of walking them down that path of, is there another level to our relationship? Like, do we get closer to a paid coaching engagement, or just allowing them to kind of get to know you better and have them kind of on your list, sometimes even just explicitly asking, can I be connected to your HR to be on your list of available coaches, just in that sort of pretty straightforward but authentic way.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I would bet that those kinds of actions and just doing them regularly and over time really lead to a really healthy business in a way that sometimes I'm an introvert. Sometimes I will shy away from reconnecting when I do get into the habit of reconnecting and just, having more of those conversations over time and building it into how I work, it's just so much better.
It's so much better. And then you feel like you have a strategy, right? Even when I developed a new talk recently, I think I reached back out. It was someone I talked to like maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I reached back out saying, hey, I created this new talk. If that's of interest to you, happy to talk more about how to get me on your schedule again, where you're kind of finding these ways to keep the person in the loop. Because sometimes what happens, so that's like the more of the long game strategy, right? Because you're building this longer term business, hopefully, right? And I think sometimes we get discouraged if like we speak or reach out and people are not immediately interested. Like that long game is really the relationship piece, and like kind of putting them into your pipeline of people to get to know better and to follow up with and keep engaged.
Follow up is so important. Right now, I've been pitching podcasts to be a guest. And as I'm doing that, I'm being careful in my pitches to really pay attention to who the host is, what the podcast is trying to do to add value. And so that part feels like it comes pretty, I don't know about naturally, but at least it occurs to me pretty naturally. But the second piece I'm noticing already after just like a few months of really leaning into this is I really need to reach back out to people way more times than I might think to.
Yeah.
That like to just without being a pest and maybe I'm a pest sometimes, but I think that's what we're so afraid of, is being a pest, where we're not at the top of somebody's to-do list. So to remind someone, hey, I'm just checking in, I'm surprised by how many times people are then writing back and being like, oh yeah, I forgot to get back to you, can you do an interview next week? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, people are so afraid to do this. I know so many of my clients are afraid to do this, but I think it is the like reach back out is so important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And think about your own email box, right?
Yep.
gets busy and filled up, and I make my list of people I want to reach back out to. And then sometimes I like somebody's name doesn't get transferred to the next time I write the list and I forget, and it happens, right? So I think being okay with reaching back out and being a little bit vulnerable in that reach out can be really helpful, because sometimes what we do, I think, when we're hesitant, at least I know I do, is to create this story around like why they didn't reach back out.
Oh, they hate me so much. They've hated me for years, even though we've never met.
Yep. They don't want to talk to me. Why would they want to talk to me? They're purposely ignoring me. They're annoyed by my email, right? When usually it's just that they didn't notice it, or it got lost in the shuffle, or they forgot to get back to you. So like I found, similar to you, that when I reach back out, often people are pretty open and receptive.
So what about in your executive coaching, do you have packages or do you do sessions one by one? Like how do you structure things?
Yeah, I usually do packages with folks, since typically the goals that they come in with, or that they initially present with, that they want to work on, are things that kind of take a little bit of time. So in order to kind of like honor what it is they're bringing in, saying that they want help with, typically I work with folks for a period of about 6 months. Sometimes I'll adjust that, but usually it's a 6-month package where that gives me an opportunity to like really get to know them, their role, their background, understand the milieu of their organization as they see it, and really help them kind of move forward in these different areas that they want to focus on.
Okay. And how do the meetings work? Is it all online? Is any of it in person?
Yeah, it's almost all online for me. On occasion, I'll meet with local folk in the area, but it's almost all virtual, where I realize that people's schedules are super tight. And as they go up their leadership chain, their schedules get even more and more packed. So if you can hit the button and there I am, and we do our hour, and then you're on to the next thing, it's really helped with consistency, I think, for people. And it's easier for people to just really like integrate it into their day. So we do virtual mostly.
How often do you usually meet with folks?
So it kind of depends, but usually it's somewhere between it's typically about twice a month, I would say, on average. On occasion, there'll be a third time kind of built in. Our initial session is a little longer, where we kind of really dive into their goals, what's working, what's not, why now, and kind of give me a little background. But typically it's about twice a month.
Okay. And did you use any different formats before you landed on this one? Did you find that you kind of made mistakes or learned other formats didn't work as well?
Yeah. I think what I tried to do in the beginning, perhaps, was a shorter term package.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a little bit of that in my business coaching in a way that it kind of lends itself to the thing we're working on. But if I was seeing someone where I would see them for like 2 months, and they would come in with kind of big goals, and I would be in a place of like, okay, well, let's just talk about what we can do in this 2-month block. And we would like get started and make some progress, right? But I really wanted it to feel manageable, like to feel real, like we're actually moving the needle on this thing that you say you want to change, right? And so then I had to really kind of step into, and this is something I think that was an adjustment from my sort of therapy training to coach training, to step into the space of like, I believe that to work on these things you're saying, it's going to take longer. And so here's the kind of option on the table if you really want to do these things that you say you want to do.
Okay. And does it work the same way with money? Like I'm thinking, like one thing that I don't know if I want to say a fantasy, maybe it's a reality, and you're here to help us know, but like there's kind of a fantasy that executive coaches are just paid so much money, and that like, executives and leaders and companies are willing to pay a ton for coaching. And do you find that that's true? Or do you find that sometimes people's, just like their time commitment, their money commitment, it's like something that they need to, I don't know, put their money where their mouth is in terms of these things being important?
Yeah, I do think when the leaders are coming in and wanting to invest in themselves, especially if it's kind of their own volition, they're coming in on their own, they're pretty invested in showing up, utilizing the sessions well, really kind of maximizing our work together. If they are investing at a little higher level, I can't, it's hard to say. I think that there's kind of a range of, what people are priced at and how they adjust for a company and how much is involved in that, which tends to kind of shift. I know some folks who, well, and myself included, I guess, who sometimes have assessments that they're doing early on. There's more of like a summary and kind of feedback to the organization versus the more individual work when they're coming to you by themselves. Some of those elements are not there. So it's, priced, it's adjusted.
Do you make more per hour as an executive coach than you do in your therapy work?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And how do you feel about the money piece with this branch of your business?
I mean, I think I feel better about it now than maybe when I first started. I think moving into any sort of self-employed place where you're charging money for either a coaching package or a therapy session or, whatever it may be. But when you're kind of having someone pay you for like your time, your expertise, your assistance, your help, like there's always a lot of stuff there. Maybe not always, but there was for me around like what is like the market rate for this? What do I feel comfortable charging at this point in my business? What do I feel comfortable charging now that I've picked up more expertise and more experience? And, there's always this kind of edge, I think, there where you're kind of having to work through some of your own stuff around like receiving money for these things and, what value kind of do you place on your work? And it just kind of opens up like a lot of self-reflection, I think.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too, like as a woman, it's like you want to charge. You want to charge what that a lot of men are charging or asking for. Is that something that you are sometimes thinking about in this work?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think there's also many of the executives and leaders that I work with are men. So I think kind of owning your value and what you contribute to the work is really important.
Yeah, because if you're not charging enough, I'm imagining that really sends a message with what I'm assuming some of them are earning and, with what their role is. I'm imagining that would really not send the right message and not make you as kind of effective in your role.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Because I think it's all of that unsaid stuff that can come immediately into the relationship, I think, very early on when, people also who, depending on the level they are in their leadership journey, but some of the folks, I think, absolutely have an expectation that like, I'm trying to rise to a really high stakes level here in my company. I'm doing a lot of things that are really important to the sake of the rest of our business or our organization. And I need someone who can hang, like who can really be at that level with me and be my thought partner. And I need you to be like there with me. So there's some work, I think, in being able to kind of step into that with people.
That makes sense. And like, I'm imagining really quickly, at least with some people, you're showing them that you're not going to be intimidated by them and that you can hold your own.
Yeah. And I think for those of us, myself included, who have like a pretty straightforward style, it fits nicely, I think, into one, coaching, and two, this type of coaching when, I think people, at least some of the leaders that I've worked with, are used to people kind of bottom lining stuff for them, right? It's like, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me kind of a pointed question to make me really think about this deeply. There's an opportunity for that kind of straightforward, like no nonsense, really reaching and pulling out the important stuff to go far in this type of work.
That's very cool. A quick word from our sponsor, which is Rebel Therapist. You've been hearing these stories in these episodes about healers and therapists taking their skills beyond a traditional private practice. And maybe you've dreamed of creating and growing your own signature offer. It's really hard for us to create a signature offer alone. It takes longer, it's lonelier, and it's a hell of a lot scarier. I would love to have you join me starting on June 24th, 2020 for Create Your Program. Over 5 weeks, You're going to create your pilot program beyond the therapy room. You'll walk through the process with me and a small group of smart, warm-hearted healers and therapists. This process also includes private one-on-one coaching with me. Learn more and apply at rebeltherapist.me/create. What tells you when someone starts working with you, or when you're just even assessing whether you're going to work with them? What are some of the things that kind of tell you whether they're going to get the results that they're looking for, whether they're likely to get the results they're looking for? And what are the times when you're like, I don't see it. I don't see you being ready for this process.
That's such a good question. I think it's really about that, assessing coachability really early on in that initial call. So I think there are a few ways to sort of go about that, but I want to know why now is the time that they really want to make changes. Kind of convince me that you're ready for this, right? In a very real way, I want to make sure the person is coachable, is open to changing these things, or is open to having discussion in kind of a vulnerable way in a lot of cases, right? So trying to assess that even just during the conversation that we're having about what's going on when they're initially reaching out, kind of assessing, are they open to talking about these things? Are they able to self-reflect? Are they able to kind of look at their role in different things and what they can control and change? Talking about timing, certainly. And then I think that there's this intangible vibe that you kind of need to have with the person. Do you kind of gel? Does your style match? Do they kind of like talking to you? Do you like talking with them? So being able to kind of assess that sort of squishy part of it, I think is really important.
Yeah. Do you find that that some people, when you push on them, are able to reflect on their own role in problems, and some people might just kind of be Teflon on that?
Yes, I do think sometimes. I think most of the folks who are going out of their way to actually find a coach and connect with a coach are a little bit probably more self-reflective.
That makes sense.
Not always, but I think, or they kind of think they are.
Yeah.
It's really a little bit more around. Sometimes you'll get conversations where the person's talking about, I've worked with other coaches and nothing has helped and nothing has worked. And I'm like, okay, well, talk to me about why you think that was, right? And so I'm trying to assess if they have this kind of internal locus of control around change versus those who are kind of pointing at some others and allowing them to take responsibility, the people who are not there on the call with us. So those are some of the things I'm really kind of assessing. And if I'm not sure, sometimes we'll just do a follow-up call. Let's talk again. Let's talk through some of these things again to really make sure it's the right fit. I want it to be the right fit for them and the right fit for me.
And I'm imagining that when it is the right fit, that's just so much better, not just for them, but for you too, in terms of growing your business and in terms of getting to watch people get the kinds of results that they want. I'm wondering too, does it feel like another predictor is, because this is for business coaching for me, is the person clear on what their expectations are out of the situation? Because if they're thinking, I really want to help them get at this, if they're thinking showing up to calls and watching videos is what will grow my business, I'm like, no. That will absolutely help you. It'll shorten your learning curve, but really only if you're taking action, and that's completely up to you. Does that come up with people too? Thinking that they can see, what their own expectations are and whether they're going to be actually putting in the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think having an explicit conversation about that is really important, right? What are their expectations for coaching? What do they expect things will look like at the end of the engagement together, right? As we are working to set our goals, what do you imagine will look different for you? How do we work towards that? But knowing within that, you have to be doing the things outside of our time together. We are just meeting a couple times a month, right? You have the opportunity all day long to practice this stuff or to encounter situations differently and actually put the stuff into practice. So they have to be open to doing that. I don't impart magic onto them, right? They have to come meet me halfway and then go do the things outside of session.
This is a big question. So really it's like about what stands out to you, but how do you spend a typical week? Like, do you time block? Do you have certain times that you do this executive coaching, or do you try and kind of fit it in throughout your week?
So I try to do all of my coaching Monday through Thursday for the most part. So that's sort of like coach space for me. So I'm doing my business coaching. It's kind of integrated with my leadership coaching. I have a networking event that I facilitate online for coaches and therapists. I'm creating content kind of in the middle of those times, like your emails, your different downloads or things that you're writing about or creating. So I try to like keep all of that in those 4 days. So they're all sort of like coaching, that kind of space. And then one day a week, my Fridays are all my therapy clients are all together on one day. So I can kind of just put on my therapist hat, keep it on all day, and then kind of stub into my weekend. But I have to sort of break it up that way. I can do different types of coaching on one day. It is hard for me to shift between therapy and coaching within a day. Just keeps things sort of cleaner and easier in my brain to do them on different days.
Oh, that makes sense to me. Yeah. And like you say on your about page, I work out when I want. I schedule clients in a way that fits with my schedule. I wear sweatpants to work. I walk my dog in the middle of the day, which I relate to 90% of that. So do you wear sweatpants when you're doing executive coaching?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have them on right now.
You do? Okay.
Yes.
So I have this block about that, like where I'm always on the fence about this. I don't wear yoga pants when I'm meeting with clients. And I really could. I mean, no one can see, but there's some kind of like mental block about it.
Yeah. Do it. It's our
But you don't
comeback
have
from
that.
Well, I mean, I think that I do my best work when I'm comfortable. So, like one of the wonderful benefits of working for yourself is like you get to kind of design what you want, right? So I'm obviously a peer professional. I have on my sweater, my blazer, whatever I'm wearing.
No, Alyssa looks totally pro. Yeah.
But yeah, then I often have my yoga pants on, and then I can kind of hop out of my chair and go make lunch or run my dog out for a 20-minute walk and come back. And yeah, I think when I'm comfortable, I'm really more focused on the person and like really can kind of be there with them. I think this is just for me though, right? Like everybody do whatever you're comfortable with. But like, I think if I felt like I had to get dressed up, I would feel like I was putting this like burden on myself, and I wasn't sure why, but yeah, it kind of works well.
Yeah, I like that. So just like we're in business for ourselves for a reason. So figure out what is going to feel good.
Yeah, like business on top. Like that's
Any productivity hacks that really work for you that stand out?
Yeah, I do a lot of different stuff to kind of keep momentum going throughout the day. I try to structure things based around like when I am the most like cognitively sharp, I will say. So I tend to be a morning person. So if I have to do writing, content development, really kind of like heavy stuff, I'll try to do that peppered into the mornings with clients. And then maybe I'm doing more like email follow-ups in the afternoon or something when I'm kind of a little bit more like I've had a full day, I'm starting to kind of wind down. Maybe I'm doing like email reach outs, email follow-ups, scheduling things, sending people like invites for my schedule, making sure automations work, tracking income, stuff where it's like a little bit less mentally taxing.
Yeah, it's not the deep work.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like I need to be really sharp and inspired and have my caffeine and like be ready to go. So I try to do that. I also usually I do kind of like 2 lists where I have a one big giant list for the week. And then I take everything from that list and block it into parts of my week. So I can just like execute during the week. I'm like, this is Tuesday, I'm doing these list of things. Wednesday, I'm doing this list of things. And so it all gets done. It's all mapped out. I don't have to think about what I'm doing each day. Obviously, there's some flexibility in there, and then I don't look at the big list because then I feel overwhelmed.
So the big list, does it go onto something like Google Calendar then when you're blocking it out? Or do you do it pen and paper?
Yeah, I do both actually. Sometimes if I want to do something in a specific block of time, I'll just put it on my calendar to like block it so nobody schedules. But it's also pen and paper. I have a notepad, old school, write it down, cross it out.
Nice. Yeah. I do the Google Calendar thing where I put items directly onto my Google Calendar. The only problem I've run into is that I've gotten a little more flexible about is then people can't schedule with me. Like if I put everything onto my calendar and then I'm like, hey, come to a podcast episode or come to a coaching session. And then they're like, when? So I've had to make myself available. You can set things to available so that I can actually, be available and then move things around as needed.
Yeah, it's always like calendaring is such a process. I feel like I'm trying to keep schedules straight, put things here and make sure it translates here. And yeah, agreed.
So if you were to time travel to the beginning of executive coaching, what stands out to you as something that you would tell the Alyssa of that time?
I think that I would tell her to own more of her skills and her training. I think I was always trying to like take off my therapist hat and differentiate myself. And now I'm doing this and whatever, preconceived ideas the leaders may have had about what a therapist was. And like, oh, I'm a coach. I'm over here doing coaching, but really being more aware of how that is incredibly beneficial and really sets you up for success and is so powerful. So being able to like really step into owning like, wait, no, I'm coming into this with like a great skill set. Like I can help you. Like we're going to do some good stuff together. Being able to own that, I think, is really helpful, and not feeling so pressured to like create immediate value for people. I think sometimes when you're like first coaching, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make these huge impacts and these transformational changes immediately. Like, no, right? You don't. That's not how it works.
That's just not how it works. Yeah.
Not right. Like, so like just taking my maybe foot off the gas a little and just being a little more aware of that would be helpful.
Okay, beautiful. I bet that's exactly what some folks needed to hear. Thank you so much, Alyssa. This has been so helpful. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was really fun chatting with you. Thank you.
You can find out more about Dr. Alyssa Adams at dralyssaadams.com. I want to thank Cosmopalms for editing this podcast and Brienne Rising for taking great care of our guest. I want to thank you so much for listening because you're really the whole point. Sign up for my weekly emails at rebeltherapist.me, and I will see you next time. Hold on just 1 second. One of my kids who's home is being loud in the kitchen, and so I'm just going to take 1 second and to remind him. There we go. Ironic because he's the editor of the podcast. So he's like, oh yeah, I better be quiet.
He's like, I'm making more work for myself. Right?
Exactly.
That's funny.